All right, top 5 Texans. This is a great video. This team is super loaded. But before we get started, I just want to clarify that there's no positional value included. It's strictly who's the best player overall. And everybody had to play at least 500 snaps, except in the cases of guys that played like 495. I would let them in. But with that said, the fifth best player for the Texans, this one might get me in hot water with Texans fans, is CJ Stroud. He was 14th in PFF grade for quarterbacks, which is definitely respectable. I know there's 32 quarterbacks that start, so it's not, far and above average, but it shows that he was executing well given his situation, which you got to factor in his offensive line does stink. And especially in the interior, they moved, I forget his name, from right tackle to left guard, I believe. And that helped a little bit. Titus Howard is his name. He's played erratically throughout his career, so it's really hard to say what is going to happen moving forward. But overall, the line was still a problem for Stroud and everybody else. And Stroud was still making big throws. And his rank that was like second most impressive to me, I looked at basically every stat for a quarterback, was that he was 17th in touchdowns. So that's, technically like below average, but they didn't really have too many great supporting pieces for Stroud. So him at 5, I think, is fair. And, this team is loaded. So being 5 for them is not the same as being like 5 for, the Titans. Not to throw them under the bus, but as a Texans fan, you probably like that. At number 4, we have Derek Stingley. He is the cornerback with the lowest passer rating allowed, which I think is definitely a murky stat. There's, going to be so much that goes into it that it's like not 100% on the corner. I think it's largely on the corner for sure. But, things like the quarterback's face and, how the pressure was affecting the quarterbacks when they threw in your area and what you were asked to do in coverage, like those all matter. But either way, Stingley was number 1 in that stat. And if I remember correctly, he was number 1 by a pretty decent margin. I should have wrote that down. The next stat that I like for him is, it's definitely not nearly as impressive, but he was the 12th best coverage cornerback. And that's pretty good when you factor in there's 118 corners. It's not like there's 25 or something. Like he's in a really good percentile. And Stingley, he wasn't doing it in an easy way. He would be tasked with covering the number 1 receiver. He's a guy that's had success in basically any type of scheme. And he's great with his ball skills. He, like 50-50 balls with him, like, usually it's like actually a 60-40 for the wide receiver. It's like, no, it's like 60-40 for Stingley. He is so good at attacking the ball. He's also good just like, if he's playing a deep zone and the quarterback is, throwing to an area, like he can come off of his assignment and make a play on the ball really well. So overall, he's very, very valuable. I feel bad that he's number 4, but there is just so much talent at the top for this team. Number 3 is a guy that would be number 1 for at least a couple teams. and Danielle Hunter. He is tied for 7th in edge pressures. So he is really good at getting after the passer. And he's also 14th in stops, which is basically just, like either a tackle for a loss on one of the early downs or getting a key tackle on 3rd down. Things that just are effective for the defense in a vacuum. And it shows that Hunter is good in the run game as well, which is really key. I was a bit hesitant with the signing of him because he wasn't very good in run defense his last year in Minnesota. I didn't know what the situation was. I was a bit concerned, though, for the Texans. And then D'Amico Ryans, and the defensive line coach, I think they get in his ear a little bit. And, Hunter is reinvigorated by being on a, more contending team than what Minnesota was last year. And man, he becomes, one of the better run defending edges in the league. He is just an athletic marvel. Like, when he was drafted out of, I believe, LSU, he was basically entirely just like a ball of clay. And it was like, he's got the speed, he's got strength, he's got bend. That's it. Like, figure everything else out. And he has. So it's awesome to see him be as good as he is. I do think, like, this was one where, like, I have a metric that determines the rank of these guys, but I just, like, looked through myself and I was like, where would I put these players? I went back and forth, really, on who should be 2 and who should be 3. Number 2, though, is Will Anderson. He's the 10th best edge rusher, according to PFF. Just for context, too, Hunter is the 12th best, according to PFF, so it's, very close. And Anderson has lived up to the high selection the Texans made. They traded up for him. And I was a bit iffy on it. And that's putting it in a nice way. I was kind of actually against it. Because I was like, you got Stroud now, you got your quarterback hopefully for the future. Build the supporting cast around him. Because at that time there was a lot in the air for what the supporting cast was going to be. And I was just like, this is a risky move for sure. Like that pick that they traded, might be like top 5. You never know. And lo and behold, it's like a playoff pick, and it, has not as much value. Still valuable, but Anderson has a 77 run defense grade and a 76 pass rush grade, and that embodies him perfectly, in my opinion. He is so stout. There is no part of the game that he's weak in. He sets the edge. He can make, gap shooting plays in the event that that he has that opportunity, because he's athletic as well. He's strong. He, against the pass, he can win with power. He can win with speed. He can win with bend. He does it all. Number 1 is Nico Collins, who I think is still a little bit underrated, even though he had his breakout year last year. This year he's like, all the stats are like, yeah, Nico Collins is great. He was leading the league in yards for like at least a couple weeks, I want to say, after he got hurt. Like, that puts it into context, just how dominant he was. And oh my gosh, he is another athletic marvel. I want to say he's 6'4". He's built too. Like, he's not like a tight end build, but he's like not one of those lanky wide receivers where it's like, every hit you're like, oh geez, they got lit up. It's like every hit, or every other hit rather, on Collins is like a guy just flying off of Collins. And Collins, he's fast. He's pretty agile for his size, I would say. I don't notice the agility at like an elite level, but I do definitely notice the speed, the size, the jumping ability, all of that elite. Um Beyond him, just like as an archetype though, he crushed it in every stat that I like. And by that I mean he was third in yards per route run. So he was super efficient when he was, you know, out there on a pass play. And he was absolutely CJ Stroud's guy. Anytime Stroud, like, it seems like this wasn't the case, but it seems like every read for Stroud is like, all right, let's see what is happening with Collins, and then let's see what the rest of the play is. Like, it just feels that way because anytime, Collins, or anytime Stroud was, in a panic or anything, like, he's looking at Collins. If there's a blitz, he's looking at Collins. He was so reliable. And, that's a big part of why he was so highly ranked in yards per out run, and also a big chunk of why he was fourth in yards per game. He was just a production monster. He runs sharp routes too. Like, I didn't say that when I was talking about him. Like, he isn't one of those, like some big dudes at receiver move like cement mixers. And no, like, he's crisp. Nico Collins is very good, if you couldn't tell. And those are my thoughts on the top 5 Texans. Be sure to let me know what yours are in the comment section. Also, be sure to like and subscribe for more football content.